Hi friends, Elena here. Thank you for joining me for our second tutorial on the Paganini Caprice number 24 as arranged by the Ayoub Sisters. Since last week, we kind of went through the whole piece, got an overview, picked up on some general ideas about the music, and we started talking about the idea of a practice checklist, just my favorite thing when it comes to practicing. I thought today we would go through the first half of the piece, so that's the theme and variations 1, 2, and 3, going a little bit deeper into some of the techniques we talked about last week and maybe finding some new things to look at. So, intonation, you probably already know that this is a big, exciting favorite thing of mine to do, and I'm actually serious about that because practicing intonation, as I've said before, it's so relaxing, and if you view it as a sort of exploration and meditative exercise, it can be so calming actually as a way to ease yourself into your practice day or a new piece. It's just a really great way to get started. So let's do a little bit of that with the theme. Intonation, it's almost always the first item on my personal checklist. I'd love to hear from you whether you think the same. So let's do a little bit of it to start. Right away I can see that this starts on A. It's in A minor, so there's going to be a lot of A's, a lot of E's, which gives us the best possible opportunity to check in with our open strings. We're going to want to see whether our A's and our E's are vibrating. Free bowing. Yep, got the E string vibrating. We have to listen just as carefully, if not harder, on the G sharp and F sharp and any note that doesn't have an open string to make sure it's ringing just as beautifully as our open strings. You know you've got a really good one when after you take the bow off the string, you can still hear the note reverberating in the room. So really listen to that. Sometimes I like to practice, I'll go into like a corner of my room and face out and direct my sound to the opposite high corner of the room. And it's kind of an added fun way for me to practice intonation, seeing if I can really send the note just by playing in tune, feeling the vibrations of the instrument and of the string, seeing if I can send them out into some imaginary, huge, beautiful hall. All right, I'm going to skip past the next 4 measures, go for the second part of this section, just because they're the same notes in case that wasn't clear. Nice. So I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. This isn't just about forcing your fingers to learn exactly what shape to take, exactly where they want to be plopped down on the fingerboard. This is even more about cleaning out the ears, creating a really clean slate in your brain, in your mind, in your ears to hear things in a really pure way, so that when you place a note down and it doesn't quite have that purity or that ring, you immediately say, oh, that wasn't quite as beautiful, as pure, as shiny as I would like. And like a taste that doesn't appeal to you in your mouth, you spit it out. So you spit out not in a mean way, but just, I didn't like that. I want to try that a different way. Great. So intonation for the theme. I would then probably move to something I talked about in a few other of the videos, starting to think about practicing in a really compact way with the bow so that I can get everything really organized. So that means as little bow as possible, tight little string crossings, compact gluey sound, so that I get the feeling that everything is very close, very manageable right here. I'm not doing any excess movements. I'm keeping it really small, and then once I have all that down, I expand outward horizontally. So if that didn't make sense, I'll do it a couple times to show you what I mean. Still under tempo, but I'm adding in maybe the bowings, the articulations, so I'm kind of fast forwarding through my checklist. Ordinarily, if I had all the time in the world, I would go through and do things really clearly one at a time. Ooh. Say bad taste. But hopefully still with some fun and humor and kindness. So I'm really exaggerating the crisp starts to the dotted notes, really gluey through the slurs. Then I might try it a little faster, a little lighter. I'll skip. And eventually work my way up to a tempo or something resembling the tempo, and just free up my right hand. Skip. So things, if you start practicing them from a really compact, close, gluey, organized way, and then add in freedom, horizontal movement in the bow, you will retain that sense of organization, sense of control over all the things that you've been practicing. So that really goes for any challenging technical passage, I would say. You could practice variation 1 the same way, you know, and eventually speed it up and free it up. Any fast passage that has a lot of moving notes or tricky bow techniques, coordination issues, start small, start compact, and then gradually breathe your way through it, free up the right hand, move the bow, add motion. So in many ways, moving on to variation 1, there are similarities to the theme. It's the same tempo. We still have 4 or 5 notes slurred at the same time. So the same principles can apply. If I were to add to my checklist for this one, obviously I would do intonation, sound. I would really make sure that my left hand is articulate. I think we decided that we weren't going to cross strings, but rather just do half steps on one string. What speaks to me about this variation are the accents. And I see a little instruction. It says con foco. So we want this to be fiery, energetic, articulate, and I really want to make those accents pop out. So again, I would start compact, really paying attention to save my bow, distribute it well so that I've got an extra jolt of energy for that accent at the end. So in slow motion, that might look something like this. I'm using such a tiny amount of bow. I like staring at my bow because it also really focuses my mind. If I'm just staring at exactly how much bow I'm using, it makes it harder for my brain to get distracted by a zillion other things, including the lawnmowers outside, which I hope you can't hear. Ooh, I just did something that I want to bring your attention to. as a thing not to do. In my excitement about the accent, I kind of jerked my head when I was playing. I went... So start to notice whether in your excitement to express something musically, you're doing extra unnecessary things with your body. Just notice, sometimes practicing in front of a mirror can be really helpful. Just to bring your attention to any extra kind of jerky motions or using parts of the body that don't really need to get involved, just keeping an eye out for that. And then seeing whether you can take that energy and instead direct it into the sound, into that contact point. Because actually, if I move my head, it might look like I'm doing something very effective, but it's taking energy away from the sound. Actually, I made less noise on the accent, and I want to concentrate it into the sound. So watch out for any extra physical things that are happening. Okay, back to these accents. I'm going to distribute my bow and give a little extra on the accent this time. Moving on. So now just 3 notes. So, a fun game that I would do, you don't necessarily have to do this in performance, but I would practice doing this with different fingers just to see if you can get your 3 just as strong as your 2 and even your 4 as strong as the others. It might turn into a really fun exercise that you're really good at with your 4. You might want to use it. I don't know. Right, so adding to my checklist for variation 1, we've done left-hand articulation. We've distributed the bow, practiced really gluey, saved a little bit of extra for the accented notes, and we've started to bring awareness into our physicality. Are we doing anything unnecessary, and can we instead focus that energy into the sound? One more thing that I wanted to mention about this variation is the use of vibrato. So a bunch of fast notes might not seem like the place to think about vibrato, but if we can give a little extra wiggle, if you are comfortable using vibrato, a little extra wiggle, especially on the accented notes, that will even increase the energy just a little bit more. Doesn't have to be a lot, just like a little electrical current that's moving through the hand and exploding on the 5th note of each group. So try that, experiment with that. If you are comfortable with vibrato, give it a shot. If not, start to imagine that your finger gives a little extra wiggle on the 5th note of those groups. Variation 2, switching gears entirely. So this to me looks all about the bow. You know, the left hand is easy enough. You really just have to imagine you're playing double stops. Put the whole finger, the whole shape of the hand down. But the challenge is really in the bow. So let's break it down. We've got dashes, and then we have accents with an added dot. So how do we make those 2 things sound different? This might be up to interpretation. This is where you as a performer get to start making some of your own decisions. But to me, a dash indicates a little bit more length, more sonority, like a baritone. Bom, 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 bom. So I would actually imagine that they're 2 different instruments or 2 different singers, one singing the bottom line and one singing the top. The accent with the dot to me maybe indicates something a little bit sharper, slightly shorter, but again, you might have a different read on accents, dots. I'm sure the Ayoub Sisters will have something to say about that, or our conductor Karina. So listen out for any other instructions that you're getting that might inform your decision. For now, I'm going to really break it down, separating the dashed notes from the accented and dotted notes. So super slowly with as much time as I need in between those two different things. And then eventually, as I get more comfortable with the material, not only will I speed it up, but I'll shorten the space in between those two lines. And it's important to me to think about what is happening at the exact moment the bow hits the string. So this is something that I like to do a lot. Pause at the moment that the bow makes contact, really envision the sound that I want, and not move the bow until I'm sure that it's going to sound as I'd like. So I would so in super slow motion, I'll show you what I mean. Get it ready. Make contact. So I'm really establishing contact. If I were to pull without releasing, it would sound terrible, like this. But that's how much potential energy I'm gathering. And then I'm just moving the hand. I'm not doing anything too fancy with my fingers. I'm just establishing contact and pulling. And eventually shortening the spaces so that it's more in rhythm. Then a few bars later, ooh, it gets trickier. So on bar 53, we've got a dash. Then we've got two notes with dots and accents, but they're slurred. So this could mean a few things. An entirely different stroke altogether, or more likely, just that those two notes should be on an up bow. So we'll prepare, we'll get the contact ready. Two up bows. And then another up bow. Rest. Same thing as the separate note, accents and dots. We want to get the contact ready and then just release. Nothing too crazy with the fingers. And you can practice this just breaking down that stroke. You can practice stopping at the end of the up bow, moving it back. You can make the circle a little bit quicker so that you're back in place. Or you can do a bunch together. So find what works for you in terms of comfort and preparing yourself for each of those notes. Now we've got totally separate bows. Oops. I have to start over. Piano. All right, so that's a lot to think about in the bow arm. So don't be afraid to break it down into as teensy tiny sections as you need to feel in control with your bow arm. Now, variation 3, which is the last one we'll do today, to me, it's actually not all that different in terms of the way to think about the bow as in variation 2. The idea of establishing contact, really establishing contact, and then pulling without too much fuss from the fingers. And also the idea of circling back, because now we have all down bows. Before we do the bow stuff, just want to touch on preparing the double stops. This is an intonation thing that you can practice in the same way as we do single notes, really slow, taking out the tempo, taking out the vibrato, and really making sure that not only one note, but 2 notes at a time are in tune. Okay, so I've done the same thing, a little sharp, all 3 times. I'm going to clock that. Right, so make sure you spend as much time as you need on the left hand, the intonation part of this. And then when we get to the bow, like I said, it's not so different from variation 2. We're going to establish our contact, find a good sounding point. So this might be closer to the frog, further away from the frog, closer to the bridge, closer to the fingerboard. Find that sweet spot that just rings for you. So we're going to get nice and gluey. Feel the potential energy. If you were to play like now, it would sound really gross, but we're not going to. We're just going to release the bow. Maybe we can practice stopping at the end, then moving back. Or we can practice circling back more quickly. And then eventually find a rhythm with it. Excuse me, I got so excited. And you can also practice with experimenting with how long you want each of these down bows. They could, the notes could be longer and the spaces could be shorter. Or a bit shorter. So play around with it, see what you like the sound of. And again, take your cues from Karina and from Nikki and the Ayoub sisters. I'm sure they'll all have opinions also. For the pits, we want just as good a sense of contact, of preparation. We really want to feel like we're pawing our strings like a sweet little kitten. And then even at a softer dynamic, a mezzo forte, we want the same idea. Never playing in our practice before we're ready, before we're sure we're going to have a beautiful down bow. Oops, I almost played a C sharp. Rest. Ooh, those have dashes now. Let's make that different. So, and then a big old snap pits. Or maybe not snap, but nice and forceful. Sforzando. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information. Those are just some of the things that you could add to your practice checklists, which may or may not include more traditional things like intonation, articulation, sound, etc. Those are just some of the things that jump out at me as things I would want to work on. So experiment with that. We'll do the second half of the piece next time, but of course you can start figuring out what it is that you find challenging, exciting, things you want to explore. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Write to me if you've got any questions, and I will see you next time.